Hi, everybody. Welcome, welcome. Hello. I'm Doménica Castro.
I'm Constanza Castro, and we are sisters and co-founders of a company called 271 Films. We're super happy to be here moderating this panel.
This panel is titled Championing First-Time Filmmakers. We are at the Proof Film Festival, powered by the American Cinematheque.
Woo, yeah. We'll start with a couple moderated questions, and then we'll open up to a Q&A.
Please don't forget to silence your cell phones. And this is a recorded panel, and it is also being photographed.
Sweet. Well, we're super, super happy to have these amazing, really experienced and incredible producers here today. And so why don't we start with you, Anna, and you can introduce yourselves and kind of go by and then talk a little bit about what you're doing and what films you've worked on.
My name is Anna Leocha. I've worked for the past 6.5 years at an indie financier called Tango. We finance movies that are $1 to $12 million, and every year we're committed to doing a debut. So that's where most of my experience is coming from. I work closely on AFTERSUN, Charlie Wells' debut. Thanks. Trying to think of other debuts. No, this year I worked on His Three Daughters. We shot 5 movies this year, one of them History of Sound, 2 debuts, a debut by an Australian director named Michael Shanks, which is a horror called Together, another debut we did, Pastel, with a director named Ava Victor. And I'm sort of transitioning out of full-time Tango work, consulting for them, still working with them, but trying to focus actually on producing a debut for next year, kind of on my own, so.
Nice. Hi, I'm Sarah Cornelius. I'm a producer at Whitewater Films. Whitewater has been around for about 20 years. It is owned by Rick Rosenthal, longtime director and producer. He directed Bad Boys with Sean Penn, the original Halloween 2, when Jamie Lee was probably about 20 years old. And in 2004, he produced a film called Mean Creek. And that was the first of really what would become Whitewater Films. The mission behind the company really was to mentor emerging filmmakers. So Rick felt like when he was a kid, they just kind of threw him to the wolves and said, figure it out. And he wanted to create a place for first-time feature directors to not only come out with a better product in the end, but hopefully have a better experience. So a number of our films have been first-time feature directors. Matthew Lillard, the well-known actor, of course, directed his first feature at Whitewater, Fat Kid Rules the World. That won South by Southwest Audience Award in 2012, and now we're adapting that into a series concept. So we're out pitching and packaging that as a YA series. We also produced Joey Soloway's first feature, Afternoon Delight. Joey then won the Director's Award at Sundance, and they and Rick went on to create the first 3 seasons of Transparent together. And the Nee Brothers, their first feature was produced at Whitewater called Band of Robbers. And Nee Brothers have just gone on to do huge things like The Lost City with Sandy Bullock a couple summers ago. So we're really proud of our track record and primarily produce films in the $1 to $3 million range. We have a couple co-productions that are larger than that now, and a couple of series concepts that we're out pitching and packaging. So that's the nutshell.
Amazing.
Hey everyone, my name's Kyle Stroud. I'm the founder of Carte Blanche, which is a boutique film production and finance company. Been doing it for about 7 years, but 4 years as Carte Blanche. We do a combination of working with kind of like seasoned auteurs like Paul Schrader, Brady Corbet, but also have worked with a lot of first-time filmmakers on their first features. Most recently, Francis Galuppi's The Last Stop in Yuma County, and Ethan Berger's The Line, which comes out in just a couple days. Just been kind of I went to film school and I dropped out 2 weeks before graduating to produce my first feature. My friend got fully financed, and it was called In Full Bloom. It was a 1950s Japanese boxing film. And then from that, I just kind of Tarzaned, as I call it. I went from one movie to another and was recommended, and then just kind of moved from film to film. But our big sorry. I just watched 46 films in the proof of concepts in the last 72 hours because I didn't know that I had to do them ahead of time. I was going to watch them all in theaters with you. So I'm a little brain fried right now. But yeah, I just produced a film called Inland with a first-time filmmaker. He made the movie for $100,000, and he got it to Mark Rylance by writing a letter, finding out where he lived in London, put it in his mailbox. Rylance called him a week later and was like, I want to do this movie. And he brought his own camper van. He brought beer for the crew every night, and everything he makes on that movie, he's like, I'm putting it into your next film. So that's a story of a filmmaker and we're producing his next film right now that we're just optioned the book and getting it off the ground. But yeah.
Hi, I'm Adrienne Childress. I'm an independent producer who's now putting Mark Rylance in all my films. I come from the diversity initiative background, running programs such as the Directing Workshop for Women, consulting on the Proof of Concept Accelerator program, no relation yet. And also working with Sundance. I've produced a few first feature films and currently are pushing 3 more up the hill, ranging between $2 million and $500,000. So you can do it for cheap as well.
Amazing, thank you.
Yeah. So curious to know, what are the qualities that you look for in first-time filmmakers that give you the confidence or convince you that it's a good idea to go for it? The question can be answered by any of you.
What I look for in a first-time filmmaker is a sense of leadership and knowing what you want. And that doesn't necessarily mean down to the type of napkins you want on the table in a dinner scene. It means knowing enough of what you want, but leaving enough space open so that you can let your collaborators come in and really work with you to maybe create something even better than what you could have thought of. So having that openness, that confidence in your own vision, that you're not afraid to let other people's visions come into the mix, I think is a really great thing to go into any first feature with.
Amazing. Anybody want to?
Yes. So our number one rule at Whitewater is no assholes. So that's the first thing. It's a team sport, and it should be fun, right? What a notion. I think that it can get really easy to forget that as we're getting into our passion projects and making our way in this crazy business with demanding projects and sometimes shoestring budgets. So you want to have an experience when you first meet a filmmaker of openness, like Adrienne talked about, and then also enthusiasm, right? So just that base level of enthusiasm and a feeling like this is someone that I would want to hang with. This is someone I want to work with. This is someone that I want to, dedicate months of time to working on their project. And then the second thing, which may come before the first thing, is just a great script, of course. So I've worked in a lot of the development space specifically at Whitewater, and you just have to have this very unique and specific concept and a lot of clarity about the story that you want to tell.
So true. Kyle.
I don't know. I was going to say the same thing as Adrienne. Honestly, a director is someone who just has to make choices over and over and over again. And the script is a document, but the movie is something that should be in the director's head. And it's really hard to know and see what that movie is. And, I think that you can only get there through conversations with that person. And the more they have the clarity to be able to like answer questions that you pose them, I think that the more confidence I have in the director. And I really like what she said about, having an openness also to collaboration and a flexibility there, because it is a team sport. And I think that's the perfect answer.
And I think just like a sense of assuredness, like the two films I mentioned, The Line and Last Stop in Yuma County, like Ethan and Francis, both those filmmakers are so, everything is storyboarded, everything is shot listed. They know every angle, everything that's coming. And I've worked with other filmmakers who maybe have a big actor in the film, or the film got greenlit because support from this actor or this person, and those sound easier at the beginning, but then they tend to be more of an uphill battle if you don't have a real fully realized vision from the get-go.
So real. I'm just curious, how many of you here in the audience are working towards like your first feature debut? Okay, sweet. Love that. So I guess my next question is, what has your role look like in working with directors on films, and what does the day-to-day look like for you individually in like pushing these projects forward? Because it really does take, I think the value of everybody here in this room is that we need champions of first-time filmmakers, because it's not easy to find money, it's not easy to convince people. So kind of curious about like, once that has happened, what does that day-to-day look like for that relationship of like producer-director?
In the inception of the process, or like during production?
Let's go with inception.
Inception, I found with lots of first-time filmmakers, it's sometimes hard to get attention of the agencies, or like to really grasp onto the project and trust it. So usually what we'll try to do is connect an actor through our own personal network or resources, or just find someone who really connects with the script. So a lot of it is that, just setting up meetings with the director, setting up one-on-ones to get a coffee with an actor and try and get some internal support early on, and then start going out, rather than just going out cold with a blank project, or script and director.
So kind of back end, like, look, it makes sense. Anybody else?
Yes, story. So I don't think anyone has ever brought a script to Whitewater that we have not workshopped what I would call extensively. I mean, that doesn't necessarily mean like this is not the movie we want to make, but can you turn it into the movie? You all have gotten that feedback where you're like, yeah, but that's not the movie I'm making, so I'm not going to take those notes. So not that, but we've done things like adding 20 pages before your current page 1, right? And just completely transforming the arc of things that way. The other thing I'll talk about in the script world is that oftentimes when you're starting out and you are wanting to make a low budget film that hopefully will get some attention, maybe even, dare I say, distribution, it can be really helpful to focus on a single protagonist. I'll read a lot of first-time screenwriters or directors who want to create an ensemble concept, which is great, but I usually say maybe wait till the second or third film to do that one, because such a key of getting your film financed is getting one great actor, right? And the way you're going to get one great actor is if they're in every shot, The actors want to be on screen, and so if you're going to get the Mark Rylances of the world, or, whoever, you want to have that one role where they're really able to thread something unique through every shot, every scene, and you're going to bait them, therefore, away from the limited series that's offering them buku bucks or the studio feature. So just think about as you're creating that concept, like the kinds of actors who would be willing to play this role, and really try to elevate a protagonist for them.
I usually come onto a project very early in the script development, sometimes before it's even been written. So I really love to dive in with my writer-director or the director and the writer, depending on the, makeup of the project, and make sure that the script is airtight before we join another company, because they will inevitably have their own development stuff. And so as long as I feel like through that process, kind of going back to what I said earlier, the director gets to better understand the story they actually want to make, and will be able to better navigate bigger notes from financiers, other companies, and know what notes to take versus what feels like it drifts away from what they're trying to do. And then, of course, we enter the chicken and egg situation of financier first or actor first. And it really depends on the movie. Sometimes if people are doing something much more naturalistic and want all unknowns, then we will try and raise the money ourselves and just go out and shoot it, because sometimes that is a little bit easier than trying to push something up a hill elsewhere. But if it's a actor-focused piece, we, pool all of our contacts. Who do we know? How can we get Mark Rylance's address? And, or in my case, it was Bruce Dern. How do we get him onto the project a week before we're supposed to start shooting? And we did, yeah. But I can't tell you how.
I may have lost the thread of the question. I don't know how to answer it though, because I guess I'm just coming most often to the process through a very specific position of being the financier. So a big part of the process for us is trusting in the producers to do all the work that these people have just talked about. Having a really good, dialogue with them. And, we always say that, the reason that we do a project is because of the filmmaker, the meeting, and the belief in what they want to do and say. And then the reason the money leaves the bank account is because of the producer and the belief that they'll be able to, protect the project and shepherd the project.
I love that. I've never heard anybody say that, and it's so true and really so smart. And I think that it sort of dives into this need of real creative and strong producers that know how to make a movie from A to Z. And I think that because we are in a room full of directors, I just kind of want to sidebar a little bit about the importance of championing and trusting that the most important collaboration, at least for me, is that sometimes it's oh no, I need my DP. That's the only person I want to talk to. And it's yes, you should talk to actually every single person that you are going to be working with the movie. But the two people, I always kind of see it a little bit you're kind of marrying and your baby is the movie, and both of you have to really be aligned and on the same page and really submersed. I'm always what should I watch? What do you, so can you talk a little bit about creatively that sort of relationship, and maybe some of your favorite things that you do, or the things that you enjoy really in building that trust and relationship in terms of the creative producer director relationship?
I'll go. Well, that's my favorite part in Constanza. I think you just put it so eloquently. It really is based on trust. And I'm very lucky through my work, through these DI programs, to have been able to build a very natural relationship with any director I work with that's actually not originally based in a producer-director relationship. It came from, me managing production for their short film or something like that. And then I feel really honored when directors come to me and they want me to produce their films for them, because I know, I don't have all the fanciest credits in the world, but it speaks to, I trust you and I want you to carry out this vision. And so for me, it's watching different movies, or just honestly, we walk around the Silver Lake Reservoir endlessly and just talk about the script, casting ideas, and make it fun before, the hard part comes in of, actors rejecting you, or financiers, which will probably happen a few times before you land the one that's going to make it all happen. And so I think that trust is so important, because I think of the producers, the director has to fall in love with each actor they go out to, because it's leading their film, or this person is leading their film. And so I understand, you got to fall in love with Andrew Garfield, and he might say no, and then you have to go fall in love with Dylan O'Brien. And, both very lovable people, I think. But I look at it as, the producer kind of having to be the more, serious parent in being able to hold the line of, yes, it's a bummer that person said no, but I am now going to excite the hell out of you about this next person, and we're going to keep this momentum going, amidst what could feel like a road of endless rejection.
Love that.
I will piggyback on that a little bit. So I think it's really quickly, as I'm getting to know a filmmaker, if we've decided to pursue a project, you get a sense for what kind of understanding in terms of reality the filmmaker might have, expectations-wise. So it's important to communicate with the filmmaker and vice versa before, of course, you sign on, to have a clear understanding of what their expectations are of me and vice versa. For example, I recently had to let go of a project for a script that I love. This is a heartbreaker. The first 3 choices for the lead actress from this filmmaker were Aubrey Plaza, Kristen Bell, and very easy to get Jennifer Lawrence. So I said, okay, we can go down this route. If you want to make sure not to skip taking shots at these actors, we can do that. But you got to give me a little time, because we're going to work the warmest route to getting to these actresses, rather than cold calling for a yet unfinanced $5 million indie. So we had that conversation. It was agreed. Yeah, I can be patient. Let's do this. I think it was 6 weeks later. I'm getting, we think it should be shot by now. I'm like, listen, we had this conversation. We can lower, right, the tier of talent that we're approaching, lower the budget, and be shooting more quickly, be cast more quickly. But that's one of those elements, right, of just communication, number one, and just what Constanza was saying about talking to more than just the DP, right? So that's such a big transition from making a short to a feature, right? Is your team tends to expand greatly in terms of number of people, and so that's just a hurdle for many filmmakers who are moving from the shorts to the first feature. Of wow, okay, I need to communicate with all these department heads and and for consistently for a long period of time. So there is that level of trust that you're having to give to more people, of course, to help bring this vision of yours to life. So I do think it takes tackling fear, right? It's like you're letting go of your baby, and it can be very difficult moving from a smaller set where you had a lot more control, or maybe a sense of more control, to welcome in and embrace a much bigger team to support you. It's a fine line, I think. It's a balancing act.
That brings me to the thought of, first-time filmmaker, you're doing it for the first time. And so in that, it implies that there are lessons to be learned, and some risks that are being taken. And so, we talk about the do's, right? But I think it's equally important to talk about the parts that make this job really hard, and this position that you put yourselves in as we're going to champion first-time filmmakers. Could you talk a little bit about what are some of the challenges that you face as producers that might, that scare you a little bit about pursuing, projects sometimes, as a more of a as advice, I would say, as a lesson, as people are going out to navigate their first films.
Okay, I'll go again. I would say, and this was honestly for me and the first director I ever made a feature with, this was a learning curve for the both of us, which you might hear this and be like, duh. We got our budget. It was 1.5, and, we had come from shorts, and we were like, this is amazing. We have over $1 million. Think of how many kids you could send to college with that. It's not a lot of money. And I think that we went in not realizing, because we didn't unfortunately have just one person in a room. We had an ensemble movie. And so I think just wrapping my head around that, and that, jumping from short to feature doesn't mean, because you have more money, all your problems are solved. And then my second advice I would give is making movies takes time. It takes a really long time. I have a project that's been in development for 3 years. That doesn't mean I'm any less passionate about it, but I think everyone knows, we're in a very unknown place in the industry where it's getting harder and harder to champion not only first-time filmmakers, but second-time filmmakers, anyone who's not doing like Marvel or like the jacked Santa Claus movie that's coming out. And so one of my favorite little things I noticed in my career, which actually has nothing to do with producing, it has to do with watching Key and Peele, is Jordan Peele literally pitches Get Out in an episode of Key and Peele where he's ranting. And that happened, I think, 8 years before the movie came out. So anyone that thinks like these types of movies, even if it's from a more established first-time filmmaker, happened overnight, like those overnight stories you hear about, like none of those are real. It's usually like an overnight that took 8 years. So I think, going into a project and thinking like, well, I finished the script and it's May and I'm going to be shooting in August is not realistic, unless you're self-financing, and then call me and we'll go do it. But like just preparing yourself for the time it's going to take and that battle and having that resilience, since it is so much different than a short film, is the best advice I could give.
So true. It's like patience. And I think I heard it earlier when you were saying the anecdote, and I think patience, it's something, it's like, it's so easy to get so anxious about like what everybody else is doing and everything
Why
is
don't we
happening for
have Jennifer
everybody.
Lawrence yet?
Why?
What the heck? It's been a month.
But that also comes with trust, right? Like of working with somebody that has a strategy and that knows the industry enough to be like, actually, we're not just going to cold because that's not going to work. So no, I mean it's all very, very, very real. I know you were going to say something.
No, I was just thinking to myself that I think all that's very true. And yeah, I think it's patience. I also just think it's like total like grit and like total resilience and total dedication. Like absolute, like you are like going to war, like battle for your movie. Like it must be done, because you will get no's like over and 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 over again. And no one is going to care about your movie more than you. Like you can have a producer, whatever, but like no one cares more than you, and you have to believe in yourself and you have to believe in what you're trying to say. And I think that that is also very contagious and infectious. And I think that people can tell when people really care, and really are dedicated in that way. I mean, coming from a financier's perspective, I guess. I mean, I meet a lot of people who are that way, and we can only finance 3 movies a year, so it's like painful. But yeah, that's one piece of advice that I would add.
I was actually just about to bring up trust just a minute ago, and I think like when I'm about to work with a first-time filmmaker, sometimes we'll even stay together for like a week or two in the development process. I'll either go stay at their place or we'll get an Airbnb together and really have that bonding time where we can hopefully nip a lot of these things in the bud, or I guess set expectations too on timing of certain things. But even in the post process, when working on the cut, lots of times I want the filmmaker to get their final cut and whatever they want to release to the festivals, work with them, shepherd that, but let it be their vision. And sometimes the film doesn't get into Cannes, Venice, Sundance, or whatever the first 3 you submit it to. And sometimes you'll even get notes from other established filmmakers, and the filmmaker will be so set on their vision that they won't want to address some of those. But once it doesn't get into maybe the top 3 or the top 4, it's this cycle that I've seen. It's almost like a vulnerability cycle after that, and they become a lot more open and willing to have those conversations. And lots of times, ultimately, it makes the movie stronger, and then it has gotten into one of those festivals that rejected it in the past.
So sort of like a little bit of a lesson there, if I'm understanding correctly, is like if they would have been open before being rejected to those notes, then maybe there would have been a better chance.
Yes, but not with every film. Sometimes, they're stubborn and it gets into Cannes and you're like, you were right.
Yeah,
so.
yeah. Yep, there's never an absolute rule for anything.
And that's so hard because you wish there was like this crystal ball that we could just ask, and there isn't. And so instinct is super important, and knowing what you're making, why you're making it, and going back to that particular. I think there comes a time when the movie looks like you've seen it so much you don't know anymore. So it's like, what are the pieces that you can really hang on to and go, no, this is what we're making, and the film checks that. No.
Adrienne, earlier you said something about like a filmmaker being like, okay, here's my script and I'm done, right? And I feel like that's a lot of the sentiments that I have felt sometimes with first-time filmmakers. Can you talk a little bit about like the filmmakers that don't do that? Like what are the things, like how and it kind of goes on with the obsession and sort of like how you don't stop working, right? I feel like if you think like the script is ready and you're just sitting there waiting and not doing the work, it sort of, diminishes that power that it has of you obsessing towards that. So like, can you talk a little bit further on that note?
Absolutely. I think that, and I might be shooting myself in the foot here, as a first-time filmmaker, no matter what, and no matter if you have the credit on screen or not, you're producing your first film. You are just as much responsible as I am for making sure that deck looks amazing, for making sure the script is tight, for doing your due diligence. I've had some writers on projects that I've developed. I've been like, they're like, okay, let's send it to CAA. And I'm like, has anyone else read this but you? And, I think that both in the edit and in the script process, having, you don't want to send it out to everyone because then you'll get so many notes back that you won't know which way is up. But I always like to kind of do it in like a rule of 3, being from Chicago, Illinois, like in the Midwest, I always send it to someone out there who has nothing to do with film to be like, do you understand this? Did you enjoy it? And then if it's a script, I always want to send it to a creative executive I have a close relationship with, that even if we don't go to their company, they have their boots on the ground and know what people are buying to see what our shot is. And then I think, it's always smart to give it to another writer friend or someone like that who's probably going to give you a lot of notes that are what they would do, but also might have a few good pieces in there, because if you're unwilling to take feedback in the beginning of the process, you're going to be in for a rough road, because, you might be able to see something so clearly in your head, but if our audience can't understand it, we haven't done our jobs as storytellers. So I think that having the lack of ego to be able to pragmatically get feedback is, you know, on top of confidence and all the other things we talked about, hugely important. But then to completely oppose myself in that statement, you also need to know, like, when to say no. You don't need to take every note, unless it's like coming from your producer. I'm just kidding.
It's like those North Stars that need to be really clear.
Yes. And so this way, as notes come in, you're understanding, or one of my favorite directors I work with, she always calls it the note within the note. So if you don't like a note, don't take it, but what is this person actually getting at? What are they bumping against? And how can you put your spin on that critique to have it still be yours?
I like the note within the note. I always said the note behind the note, but I kind of like the within. Yeah. It's a bit more complicated.
Grammar's so important.
Yeah.
Change the meaning of anything.
Yeah, I'm like the note's inside the note, not behind it, inside it. Okay, cool.
In getting a little bit more specific, could any of you share an example on a time when you had to step in and provide like really critical support and guidance with a first-time filmmaker during like a difficult time during production? Because the reality, I think you also said it earlier, it's like no matter how much money you have, it's never going to be enough time or money. Like it's never going, that nature of our industry will never go away. So yeah, curious about just an anecdote perhaps that you think might be helpful in sharing.
I've signed NDAs, so I can't really. But we do have two acronyms. JKS, just keep shooting. And better is the enemy of good. So I think we've all been there where you're tunnel vision mode, you know, like just do another take, It's going to be better. It's going to be better. Yeah, but that take was good. No, we're going to keep getting better. Guess what? It's never going to get better. Take the good, you know. There are times where you just, you know, that was good. Moving on.
Amazing. I've had so much fun, and I feel like also I've learned really some by listening to you about, you know, what it takes. So I'm really, really honored to be here with you. So now we're gonna open up for audience questions. There's a mic at the front, so if you can just come up actually if you have a question, maybe in line. Thank you. I know.
Hey all, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. My name is Aaron Casera. I'm a writer-director primarily. I have my third short that I directed on the circuit right now, and I am finishing my first doc short. And you kind of touched on this. I've always sort of also been the producer. I've had producing partners, but I'm also producing it. So do you think like leaning into that, because I have a bunch of features that I'm writing, like leaning into the producer development as like, you know, maybe trying to write a feature budget or anything is the right move, or try to step away from it more?
My kind of rule around that would be until you're 6 weeks out, be a producer on your film. I don't think you need to go as far as, like, unless you know how to make a budget, that's only going to help you.
Right.
You know, because then you don't have to pay someone else to do it. But as far as producing your film, I always like to have the filmmaker, as soon as we're 6 weeks out, like if money's in the bank, like your producer hat's off, your directing hat's on. Because then you need to start to silo yourself into the creative. Well, silo yourself with all your keys and me, of course. But you don't want to be, you know, staring at monitor trying to figure out something and then also wondering, like, is lunch here on time? So I think, you know, whatever, and I think for every filmmaker it's different, but whatever that process, and you'll figure it out with every film you do, what is the process of starting to detach, and how can you communicate those boundaries in a really effective but polite way with your team and with your producing partner?
Okay, next question.
Hi. I was just curious for like relatively unknown filmmakers and just how they can, I guess, create circumstances where you would be willing to make time to at least have a conversation and see what could become of that, I guess.
I like reaching out before it's about a specific pitch and just saying, hey, can we have just like an intro and a brief chat, like 30 minutes or less, Zoom, coffee, whatever it is, so that it's not like the executive or the producer, whoever you're reaching out to, is immediately put on the spot needing to say yes or no to that one project, but you're getting to let them know who you are, you know, and start a relationship, right? It's really the relationship building, and just don't even pitch one thing on that first meeting, you know? Just say, this is who I am, ba, ba, ba. Maybe at the end of the meeting say, do you mind if I send you an email with like a short that I made or something? And then by that point, the person's like, yeah, I love you, great. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre t-shirt guy. Let's send me an email.
I think just to piggyback off of that, which I think is really good advice, I think one thing to not do is to, you know, with the initial reach out, with the initial email, send a really long email. Like, just try to avoid that. Yeah, with too much information about your project or who you are, where you're coming from, it should feel casual, and I don't know, yeah, it should feel brief, I think.
I'll make that text white. You can highlight it if you want to read it.
Thank you. Next question.
Hi, I'm Sarah Wisner. I'm a filmmaker, writer, director with my partner, Sean. We have our 6th short film playing here. And my question is kind of similar, but in the reverse. Like, I'm wondering if you go looking for emerging filmmakers, and if so, where do you look for them? Where do you find them? What does that look like for you?
Lots of time in the past, it just it just happens, like when you're not expecting it. Just because it's been a recurring thread, the Mark Rylance director, his name's Fritjof Reiter. He's a German-British filmmaker, and I needed a place to stay in London. And I texted my friend, hey, I'm in between this festival and this festival. I'm going to be a week. He's like, yeah, you can stay here or here. And I was like, oh, this guy sounds like a cool filmmaker. I'll go stay with him. And then we just became like best friends, and now we're working together. And then another filmmaker that just produced her first film, Alex Baranova. She was a first-time filmmaker. I met her in Venice in a group chat. We had Airbnb. There's these Sean Glass group chats. I don't know if anyone's heard of them. There's where, yeah.
All of them.
There's like 500 people in these things, and you go to a festival, and it's a great way to, like, if someone has extra tickets, you know, to be like, yeah, I'll take them, or just to network and meet people. And she ended up staying in we had an extra room we put on there. She stayed in our Airbnb, and then next thing you know, we're in Greece shooting her film. So usually just in
Housing.
Interesting way. Housing. I guess it's housing. But also places like Proof. I mean, that's why we're all here too, to like meet young, new, exciting filmmakers.
I really like that process personally. Like, I think that I have tried to do that, like excavating and researching and things like that. I mean, with AFTERSUN.
Hello.
I had seen Charlie's shorts like 5 or 6 years ago, and had reached out and knew she was writing a script, and was trying to get it for Tango and whatever. Then, you know, she did the Sundance Labs, and Pastel had her, and we had done Ever Rarely with them. And so it was kind of, you know, I knew I could really advocate for this filmmaker that I really liked. And there were these producers that we had already worked with and trusted who were working with her. But I love going and like watching shorts, going to shorts festivals, watching the shorts that go to Sundance, and, you know, trying to keep like my ear to the ground. I think it's such a fun, amazing process to like discover or help, you know, somebody get their career off the ground.
Amazing. Thank you for your question. Okay. Hello.
Hello. First of all, I really appreciate you guys coming out and sharing your insights. My question kind of continuing on the theme that seems to be going. If you're just getting exposure to a first-time filmmaker and you have a very small sample size, like, for example, a proof of concept short film, What would be something within that project or in that person that would, signal to you that that person is ready to like take the next step that would get you excited about working with them?
I think it would depend on, how well is this first short film executed, as well as what is the story that you're bringing to the table, and how does it, whether it's a proof of concept or a short film, how do both connect and feel like your voice? Because sometimes I'll, be looking at a filmmaker and they'll have a drama short film and like a comedic short film, and then they're pitching to me a sci-fi horror. And I'm like, okay, but like we have, how did we get from like A, B over to like D?
It's a big part.
And so I think that a consistency in vision and, being like, I can point to this thing that I've done. It's similar here. If it's lower budget, that's always appealing. I also, though, would recommend, if possible, and I know this is easier to say than do, sometimes even before I'll attach myself to a feature, I'll be like, can you make another short? Just, trying it at least a couple times to like really get, figure yourself out as a director before you have to go into this bigger swimming pool and manage a lot more people. And because it's your first feature, usually no matter what, it's going to be something really near and dear to your heart. And so I think, the more experience you can give yourself on lower stakes things, the better.
Thank you. All right.
Hi, thank you all so much for giving your time and your wisdom. It's been a really inspirational panel. I feel like I've learned a lot. One of the things that you all have talked about are some common things that first-time directors do wrong when they're first starting out, like whether they're not willing to listen to notes or if they want Jennifer Lawrence right away. What are some other common first mistakes that first-time filmmakers make, and how do you help them fix them or not make them at all?
I've found that a lot of it, I'm not like an on-set producer. So I have, a specific kind of experience, but I honestly do think a lot of it comes in post in the edit. And just directors getting like too attached to things. I think that I've seen a lot of like short filmmakers become like good, like great filmmakers, like in the edit, like there's like this moment where they make this decision that I can tell is really difficult for them. I think a certain snow blindness happens in that space, and I think when you're willing to like really, it's so cliche, but like chop something away, what's on the cutting room floor is, whatever that saying is. I think that that really helps you grow, and that is where I see a lot of filmmakers get a little bit too kind of stubborn.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm an actor, writer, producer, and I'm working on my first feature. Sorry, I'm already there in my head. So you guys talked about having the stamina to kind of stick with a project for years as it's in development. I was in another panel where there were some filmmakers who were like, I'm just gonna make it, and did a Kickstarter campaign, and that took them pretty far as well. So do you have any thoughts on, this choice of like, let's just make it with what we have and let's fundraise and rally everyone we know, versus just sticking to your guns like, I want this name, talent, or whatever it is. And if you are in the camp of, wait it out a little longer, as the first-time filmmaker, what are you doing for those 3 years? What do you think they should be doing? Are you making other shorts to keep being creative? Are you helping the producers to also find a way to get those contacts, or what do you guys think?
My theory on this does tend to be a little bit the slower route, seconding, make some more shorts, right? Establish your voice. It's a tough one. I understand, because I do see, and you hear stories and see films where it's like, I just put it together, I made it happen. But the thing is, you only get one first feature. And if you want to make a second feature, guess what they're going to ask? Can I see your first feature, right? So you want to just feel really, really solid in terms of the voice you've established up till that point. I like what you're saying, Adrienne, about sort of like careful about, you know, you direct a comedy and then you direct a drama and then you want to make a feature slasher, you know, and I was like, what is happening? So, you know, it kind of goes with that idea of starting in one lane and knowing that eventually you can diversify, but kind of branding yourself in that sense as a filmmaker. And if you're able to kind of, you know, use those shorts to develop your voice and say, wow, each time I make a short, my voice is really being elevated, my vision is clearer, these elements are coming together better and better, and now look at this palette of projects I'm able to show a financier or producer to make my first feature. And that also gives you time to build relationships, right, in town, et cetera, so that when it's time to make that first feature, or when that first feature is done, you have more friends and doors you can knock on to kind of get the word out about this amazing first feature for this filmmaker. You know, it's not just the new guy made a first feature that nobody knows the guy yet, right? It does help to have that extra time where you're building relationships along that route too.
I don't know if I totally agree, but I think I totally understand that, but I feel like a lot of filmmakers, also first-time filmmakers, get a little bit too precious, you know, about their first film and kind of get like scared to sort of take the leap or something. It's a really uncertain time in the industry. You're never gonna get like, I mean, you're never gonna get everything you want. That's true. But I think that, you know, making do with what you have and being scrappy is like a real, I guess, I don't know, a quality. I think that that will help you get far. And I mean, some of my favorite films that I've seen, filmmakers that I've worked with or tried to work with, like something like We're All Going to the World's Fair, you know, it was made for like $300,000, and Jane was just like, I'm gonna make it for whatever I have. I'm gonna make it with non-actors, and I'm just gonna make sure that whatever I do, whatever I can execute, does feel like a reflection of like my vision and the kind of movies that I want to make. And they just went and did it. And like, I mean, I really like the line, and I know that it was made with like a lot of different pieces of financing, like so many. I mean, you can speak to that, but I think that like that's another cool example of just like a 15-day shoot or 17-day shoot or something like that. Like just doing what you can with what you have and trying to like be brave. And, you know, I think that is worthy.
I think also just being like proactive and just going to festivals even if you don't have a film there or necessarily a reason to go. Like I go to Cannes and Sundance every year even if I don't have a film plan with those two, just to meet people and connect. And I just think that's an extremely important element of it, because it's a lot easier to connect with someone in person, or you watch their film, you go to their party, you have a conversation with them, rather than someone just getting a cold email pitching their project. And even like you said, you know, don't necessarily even pitch anything right there. Just make that connection, connect with them on a human level first, and then down the line when you're back in LA or wherever, grab a coffee, chat more.
I also wanted to add, just because I don't think this is something we talk about enough in this industry, is also what people might be wondering is, okay, so like, how do I survive and pay my rent in these 3 years that I am trying to push my movie that I'm not getting paid to develop up a hill, and can't afford to go to festivals every year to meet people? And to that I say, find any type of job that is not going to crush your soul, but that's going to give you the stability that you can then, and it doesn't have to be film related. In full honesty, we had all these strikes last year. I worked as a part-time salesperson at Aesop selling fancy soap. Like, we all got to do what we got to do to survive. And I don't think people talk enough about that, especially from a filmmaker or an independent producer's perspective, because oftentimes you're dealing with a company who, you know, they're all on salary. And so you're like, yeah, I can sit in development for 3 years, but I don't have a home. And so I think there's a lot of stigma around like, oh God, I have to go get, a job at, selling like grass, like which people do. And I think that not having any shame in that, or like being a salesperson like on the phone every day doing customer service for lawn care. I don't know why that's the one that keeps coming to mind, but like I think like making sure you are taking care of yourself, like your physical, your mental, all of those needs, because you don't want to finally get the money for a movie and you also think, I think a common misconception about like directing your first feature, like, oh, you're going to get paid. No. Like you will, of course, but it will never equate the time and energy that you have spent on your features that you have done for free. And so I think like, we all run ourselves ragged trying to do the most, and then we don't actually take care of ourselves. So I think figuring out a plan, how do you financially support yourself during these 3 years of development, is huge, and not having the ego to be like, I can't go work at a retail store where I might see my friends. Like, it's okay, we're all doing it. So coming up with a plan on how to be stable in that so you can protect your creative light, I think is hugely important.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
That's all the time we have. I wish we could keep it going. Thank you so much to our panelists for coming out and sharing your experiences. And thank you to all of you for coming to listen and for doing your work, doing your art.